Okay. Well, today's topic is an important one, actually. We to me, when partnerships change. So losing a spouse or life partner is one of the most profound changes that any of us can experience. And yet so few of us feel truly prepared. As we age, it's not only likely, but statistically common. Over 27% of adults over 60 in the United States will be living alone. And that number climbs with each passing decade. While it can feel uncomfortable to plan for this kind of transition, in fact, I talked to a gentleman who called me 2 days ago, and he said, I'm not going to come on Wednesday. I usually am there. And I said, well, why not? He goes, I don't want to talk about that subject. And so, we know this is very hard, but you're here, so good for you. So having these conversations, doing this now can ease the emotional, legal, financial burdens during an already difficult time. This month's seminar brings together a trusted attorney, a fabulous financial advisor, and a wonderful local pastor to offer guidance and support. Our goal, as always, is to engage, educate, and empower you with the tools and insights to face the what-ifs of aging with greater clarity and confidence. Whether you've already experienced the loss of a partner, and I know many of you in the room have, or want to prepare thoughtfully for the future, this conversation today is for you. So remember, you're not alone. Taking steps today is an act of courage and care, both for yourself and your loved ones. So let's begin the conversation with our experts today. And we're going to start out by inviting them to introduce themselves. And I think even before we do that, I have a couple questions that they wanted to know from you, the audience. How many of you are here today with your spouse? Okay. Not many. How many of you are currently the caregiver to your spouse? All right, about the same. And then how many of you have recently lost your spouse, your life partner, your loved one? Oh, goodness. Okay, so that's actually the majority. Okay, so that was hopefully helpful to know. Mary, why don't we start with you and ask you to introduce yourself and what do you do and how long have you done it and why did you get into the biz?
Just to push this button here. Hi, everybody. I am Mary Ballin. I am a financial advisor.
Oh, yeah.
You can't hear me?
And then we're just going to keep it on, too.
Okay. We're just going to keep it on.
So it's nice and close to
Okay. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah, you can hear me better now. I thought I was going to have to get my lifeguard voice out. That's what I did through my teenage years. I am Mary Ballin. I am a financial advisor. I work with a registered investment advisor called Paragon Wealth. My office is in Walnut Creek. I hold a certified financial planner designation. I also hold a certified divorce financial analyst designation. Hopefully none of you have to deal with that. I've been doing this since 1997 is when I joined Schwab. Before that, I was a retail executive with Target stores.
Nice, nice. And you know what, for the audience, I know you studied hard for this. What is a CFP?
Oh, right. Those acronyms that we all use.
Right.
A CFP is a certified financial planner. It is the gold standard for financial planning. It is a very rigorous exam. When I took it, it was a 2-day exam, so not quite as rigorous as what Lee had to go through for the bar, because he did 3 days probably. Yeah. And we were taught a lot of stuff. So estate planning, tax planning, investment planning, insurance planning, small business retirement planning, something else. There's 2 more subjects. I think one of them was compliance, though. You don't need to know about that. I have to know about that. But yeah, it was a 2-day exam. It's not any longer, but I really didn't want to show up the second day. I did not pass it the first time I took it. I'm opening my kimono to you. But I did pass it. I was very happy. So
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. All right, Lee, who are you?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Just
Okay.
push it in so it's comfortable for you.
Hi, everyone. Great. My name is Lee Castor. I'm an estate planning attorney. My office is in downtown Walnut Creek on Bonanza Street, right near the intersection of Bonanza and North California Boulevard. I have a very small firm. It's myself. I have one associate attorney who works for me, and I have a full-time paralegal. So you might consider me a solo attorney or very small firm attorney. I do estate planning. I handle probates, and I also handle administering trusts after the creator of the trust has died. So it's referred to as trust administration. So those are my 3 areas of practice. I've been doing this type of work for 15 years now. I started my own practice in 2010 and transitioned into doing the estate planning and probate work. Before that, I worked for 10 years at doing litigation. I was a litigation attorney at a large national law firm out of law school, and then a mid-sized firm in Oakland, and eventually just realized I didn't want to do litigation anymore. And so I decided to open my own practice and transition into estate planning. And the good news is I love the work. So it was a bit of a leap of faith, but in hindsight, it's one of those decisions you're so happy you made. So I think that's about it. I am married. I have 2 kids. I'm about to be an empty nester. My younger child is a daughter, and she's about to start college at UCLA in about 6 weeks. So we're excited about that. And moving on to that next phase of life. And I live in Oakland. I, again, work in Walnut Creek. So that's it.
Being an empty nester is not all bad, I will say.
I also can say they do come back after
Yeah,
college.
sometimes they do. Sometimes they do.
I'm aware.
The old rebound effect. Jane, who are you?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Jane Doty McKenzie. I'm a pastor at Lafayette Orinda Presbyterian Church, and I spend a lot of time with people who are in their final days, and also with people who have lost their loved ones, and just providing emotional and spiritual support. My background, it has nothing to do with ministry. I worked for Chevron for 35 years and retired early as kind of the chief learning and talent officer, and went back to seminary at Princeton Seminary, and have been graduated about 10 years ago. So this is actually my retirement gig. So if you're looking for some fulfilling work to do in retirement, I can tell you this is
Wow.
it. And love what I do, and most of my learning about what it means to lose someone you love is through my own life experience and being in very tender moments with people. And I can just say that being with people as they are breathing their last is sacred ground indeed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay, Jane, well, we're going to start with you. What advice do you offer a spouse facing a loss of their loved one, a spouse, a partner? Is there a way to prepare emotionally or spiritually for this?
Well, that's a really big question. So it looked like a lot of you have already lost a spouse. If you're expecting, and some of you may still have a spouse who is living, I tend to distinguish between types of grief that we experience. Conventional grief is grief that we experience after someone has died. There's also something called anticipatory grief, which is when you're caring for someone who you know has a terminal illness. And then there's also something called ambiguous grief, which is grief when you have a spouse who is there physically but may not be there emotionally or psychologically with you due to dementia or Alzheimer's. And all of those have their own unique path through grief. And I would just encourage you, if you have a spouse or a loved one who is still alive, to just make every moment count. That's, I think, the best way you can prepare so you've got memories to hold on to in terms of asking them what it is that's going to make their life meaningful for their remaining days, sharing stories with each other. A great thing to do is to just pull up old pictures and reminisce together and go through those and just kind of retell your life story together. But it's really more about kind of making every moment count that you can, so that you don't have any regrets afterwards. And if there are some relationships that perhaps may need to be healed, to focus on those so that you know that you've done everything that you can for yourself and for your loved one.
Nice. So this is kind of an odd question, but is there a right way to grieve? I know it's kind of odd. I know some of us just sort of want to get over it quickly. Actually, one of my mom's friends, her doctor prescribed these some kind of medication, right, antidepressant. She never went through the grieving process, ever. And my mom did, but it took her 5 years. And other people, I don't know. Like, is there a time? Everybody's different, right?
Yeah, right. So the answer to that is no, definitely not. We all have our own unique way of handling grief. For some people, actually, the death of a loved one is a relief. And that may be a weird thing to say, but it can be a relief if you've had a loved one who is suffering from terminal cancer, or who has been in pain, or who has, been in a care facility, memory facility with Alzheimer's for years. That can often come as a relief because they are finally released from the pain and everything that they were dealing with. For others, if the loss of a loved one is really sudden, it just totally shatters and shakes up our world. So it depends on your relationship. It depends on kind of how much time you may have had to prepare. Grief has no timeline. There is no checklist. There are no performance standards. There is nothing that says you're done, because I will be here in front of you today and say, I don't believe you are ever over grief. And the way I kind of describe this is, and Mary was talking about how she went into labor and didn't even know she was because she has such a high pain threshold. But I think of, for those of you who have had born children or have been with a spouse who has, I compare grief to the opposite of giving birth. Because when you give birth, the pains usually, start pretty slow and then they become really intense and you deliver a new life into the world. With grief, it's the opposite. The pain and the waves of grief are really intense at the beginning, but they ultimately ebb over time. But the interesting thing is, every egg a mother has in her body to produce a child was there while she was in her mother's womb. And the grief that you experience leaves its own seeds in you for the rest of your life. Oh. And so the challenge for us, I think, is really to take that grief and look at how our relationship with our loved one has impacted us and transformed us, and carry that forward in our own lives in a way that honors them and in a way that perhaps transforms us to be more compassionate and caring towards others.
That was an incredible answer. Thank you. Wow. So socially, what if the spouse or partner who passed made all the social arrangements? They were the one with all the friend connections. Is it common to see the surviving person kind of withdraw or isolate? And then, I did a little side note. Maybe one of the reasons women tend to live longer because we're more social typically. Hate to generalize like that. What do you think about that?
Agreed. So if you have, if your spouse is still living, my encouragement is to learn as much as you can about their share of what happens in the household. Whether it's, and you'll probably hear this from these other two, whether it's the finances, taking care of the home, taking care of the pet. I don't even know where our vet's office is because my husband takes care of the dog. I'm sure I could find it. But, all the things that your spouse does, try to learn how to do those in advance so you aren't, overwhelmed afterwards. Socially, it is the case. Women do tend, and stereotypically tend to be more social. And we know through scientific studies that being in a caring community, having a good social life, taking care of yourself physically, and eating well are all things that can help to give you a longer health span, but they're also things that help you thrive as you age. And so if your spouse is the one who's made all the social connections, you might have to kind of get out of your comfort zone and figure out how to do that. Start asking people to go for a walk, meet for coffee, find some hobby that you can join, a class that you can take to get out and meet others.
Yeah, good. So we've all heard it's a good idea to wait a year, right? We're all supposed to wait a year before making any big decisions. But I'm wondering, why is that? And I'm thinking more along the lines of rebound dating. I've seen this more with men, even my sweet Swedish papa. All of a sudden, he was like fresh meat in Rossmore, I'm telling you. Remarrying quickly, moving quickly to be closer to family. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Again, I think this also depends on kind of your what your life has been with your spouse. Again, if you've had a spouse who's been ill for quite a long time or in a memory care facility, it's probably a little bit easier to move on because you have had some gradual detachment and grieving all the way along. But I don't think there's a right answer to that. But I do think that it behooves you to care for yourself and your own grief and make sure that you're not looking for somebody else to help you deal with your grief. Grief is something we have to deal with by ourselves and find our own way, not through it, but find some way to incorporate that into our going forward reality and being prepared to do that on our own rather than expecting somebody else to take care of it for us.
Wow. Okay, I love that. Thank you. Lee, you're up.
Great.
Okay.
I'm ready.
So I mean, and we've talked about this before, we have, but it shocks me sometimes when I'm talking to some of you that you still don't have a trust or a will, or you haven't looked at it for 35 years. So my first question to Lee is, what are some of the documents either a married couple or someone that's a widower should have in place?
Yeah, so everyone over the age of 18 should have, at a bare minimum, should have two documents: an advance healthcare directive and a durable power of attorney. Okay, so those are two estate planning documents. And that's the bare minimum. Okay, so the next step beyond that is it's going to be a will or a trust, okay? Wills and trusts are legal documents. They both essentially accomplish the same purpose, which is to set forth the distribution of your estate on your death. So it's gonna lay out in a will or a trust, on my death, who receives my estate, how much does each beneficiary receive, what percentage or portion, and also how is this beneficiary going to receive the money. Trusts, as I'm sure a lot of you know, trusts are very popular in California. One of the main advantages of having a trust in lieu of a will is it avoids probate. So as long as it's set up correctly, there's caveats there. But as a general matter, trusts avoid probate. That is, in most cases, is a good goal. Probate is the process of administering an estate through the courts. So the probate judge oversees that process. The drawbacks to probate are it takes a long time and it's expensive. So many people, one of their goals in doing estate planning is they want to keep their estate from going through probate, so they set up a trust. So the reason you want to do a will or a trust, and that's it's a decision everybody has to make when they go through this process. Do I do a will or do I set up a trust? But the reason you want to do it is if you do no planning at all, neither a will nor a trust, then you completely lose control over what happens to your estate when you die. So the state of California, the California legislature has come up with a default estate plan for people who don't do any planning. So there are statutes in the probate code that say if you die without any estate planning in place, this is who gets your estate. So you might have a situation where if you don't do planning, your estate ends up going to people you really would rather not leave your estate to, right? It could be a relative that you have literally no contact with, and now they're going to get the majority of your estate. So it behooves pretty much everybody to do some form of estate planning. Ideally, you're going to do it with a competent estate planning attorney. And you're going to sit down and decide, it's the who, what, and how. Those are the basic questions. Who am I going to leave my estate to? What am I going to leave to each of these people? Oftentimes it's expressed as a percentage of the total estate. You might just divide it up 25%, 50%, 25% to the beneficiaries. The third part is that this is often people don't think of this, is how is this person going to receive their share of my estate? And what I mean by that is there's different ways of leaving assets to people. You can leave it to them outright. That's one option. Or you can leave things to people in trusts, and there are reasons to do that. So that's a discussion that ideally you have with your estate planning attorney as part of the estate planning process.
Right. I know it always kind of shocks me when people tell me, oh, we did our own trust. We went to LegalZoom dot whatever and did that. But then you're not having those conversations from a seasoned, experienced person that can think of all the ways that things could go sideways if it's not written up correctly, right? So, and you mentioned something that I wanted to ask you. You said, in most cases, a trust would avoid probate. In what case would a trust not avoid probate?
Yeah.
Or are we going too deep into the weeds?
No, I could sum it up.
Okay.
I mean, the thing with trusts is when you set up a trust, you have to take an additional step of, it's called funding the trust. So with trust, you have to physically put assets into the trust while you're alive. And I know that's a mouthful, right? So that's it boils down to additional paperwork. It could be recording a deed to put your house or your condo into the trust, but you have to take that extra step of funding the trust for it to avoid probate. So what we have is situations where somebody sets up a trust, but they don't put their assets into the trust, and then they die, and you end up having to open a probate, even though they set up a trust. So that's not a good way to do it.
And something to think about when you refinance your homes, it falls out of the trust. And it used to be that the title and escrow officers would be able to do that for us at county. They don't do that anymore. So if you've refinanced your home, check to make sure that your deed is in the trust, just like Lee is saying. Because I think most people just don't think about that.
I also think it would be interesting. Lee, can you share with everybody what the probate limit is in California and why most people like to get a trust?
Now, what the question was, what is the probate limit?
What is the probate limit in the state of California?
Yeah, I think if you're asking what small estates are exempt from probate in California. So and that dollar amount goes up periodically. Right now it's $208,850. So you can basically die with an estate as long as it's not worth more than that amount. It's not going to trigger a probate.
And that's a gross estate, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's not net of mortgages.
And if you live in this area, I'm going to bet
Your house is worth more than
estate-
$280,000.
Even if you rent, you probably have more than that in your bank account just to survive, just to buy groceries, right? Okay, Lee, what's an AB trust? And is it a married couple's, is it in their best interest to have one? Or if they have it, should they keep it?
Yeah, I mean, the answer there is it depends, right? It's a classic attorney's answer. So, AB trust, it's a type of trust. It's most common with blended families. So sometimes we have people who come in, married couple, husband and wife. Maybe it's the second marriage for both of them, or even the third marriage or fourth. And they each have kids from prior relationships. It's what we refer to as a blended family. So in that situation, each of those spouses have several different goals. They might want to provide for their current spouse financially. If I die first, I might want to make sure my wife, who's my second or third wife, is taken care of financially for the rest of my life, but I don't want her to be able to necessarily leave my estate to her children. Okay, so there is a way to set it up where you can accomplish both, and that's called an A/B trust. And it's much more complicated to administer a trust like that, but if you're in a blended family, you pretty much don't have a choice. It's the best plan, I would say, in 99% of the case for blended families. And then, I sometimes even couples where it's not a second marriage still want to do this. So an A/B trust essentially allows you to legally control who ultimately gets your estate after you're gone. So it's a way to control that rather than just leaving your estate to your spouse and then it's up to him or her who to leave it to when they die. And so, every married couple has to make this decision. How do we want to structure our trust, right? Do we want to set it up where it's simpler and everything just goes outright to the surviving spouse? That works great in a lot of cases. Like, let's say the couple have been married for, 65 years and they only have children just together with each other. That can work. But if not all families are created equal. So if, blended family, probably looking at an A/B trust.
Okay, thank you. So obviously we always say almost at every single seminar, plan ahead, plan ahead, plan ahead, right? If nothing else that you've heard at any of these seminars, you know that you need a what-if plan. May never need it. Well, you need the plan, but the what-ifs may never happen, but it's better to be prepared. But so obviously we want to always be talking to our attorney as life changes and goes on. But should we consult with an attorney after our spouse passes, and why?
Yeah, the answer there is definitely yes. So the death of your spouse is absolutely a reason that you need to go in and consult with an estate planning attorney. Most people are going to probably go and see the attorney who drafted the trust, assuming that attorney is still in business, has not retired or died. If the attorney who drafted the trust has retired or died, it's fine. You can find another, as long as it's a competent, qualified estate planning attorney, they will be able to pick up the documents that another attorney drafted and read and understand them, no problem. But yes, the death of your spouse, definitely you should see the attorney. It doesn't have to be like the next week after your spouse dies. You can wait even a couple of months, but within a couple of months, go see the attorney. The reason being, there are certain tax deadlines that kick in. One of them is the deadline is 9 months from the date of death to make certain tax elections. So obviously you don't want to blow that deadline. And not to mention that when your spouse dies, there are certain steps that need to be taken. Even if the estate does not go through probate, let's say you guys set up a trust and everything's in the trust, everything's great. Your husband designated you as beneficiary on his IRA, everything's clean and, done perfectly. There are still legal steps that need to be taken after your spouse dies that you should hire an attorney to help you do that, to make sure everything's done properly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So is there an optimal way to title real estate, bank investment accounts, and who's the best to designate as beneficiaries of retirement plans such as IRAs and 401ks and life insurance policies?
Yeah, so title is really, really important, and it's something that people just, in my experience, just normal people don't pay attention to at all. So the term title refers to a document that reflects the legal ownership of an asset. And so, for example, like for real estate, the title document is generally going to be a deed, a document called a deed. For financial accounts, those accounts also do have a title. The document that lists the title is typically going to be an account agreement that you have entered into with the bank or, Charles Schwab or wherever the account is. So the title of things I cannot overstate the importance of title when it comes to what happens later on when people die, right? It has enormous legal implications, how the title, and what's more confusing is there's multiple ways to hold title to assets. So I would encourage you to try to, take a look at the title to things, your own assets, if you can. It's kind of interesting to see how things are titled. I mean, deeds are a little tricky because, you probably don't want to go to the county recorder in Martinez to get the deed, but if you have the deed to your house, you could look at it. Accounts, you can generally glean the title on the account just from looking at the monthly account statement. A lot of times it will list the title on the first page of the statement. So like, let's say you have an account and it's in your trust. Oftentimes you get the statement, it'll say, the Smith Family Trust on there. You could, okay, now I know that account is in the trust. So pay attention to title. It's really, really important. I've had cases where, a couple clients of mine, married couple, they buy a new house and they're just, everybody's excited. We're buying this new house. And when you buy a house, the title company, they ask you, how do you want the title to read on this property? And then the couple, I don't know, they just guess, right? So that's probably not the best, and I've seen this happen, and then they come in, we bought a new house, and then we pull up the title, and the title is totally wrong. So just be aware, it has enormous implications for when people later on die, how the title is held. In terms of, designating beneficiaries, that's very case by case, like who should you designate as the beneficiary of your IRA account, right? That's going to be a discussion you're going to have with your estate planning attorney. And that's going to depend on what are your goals, right? Like, who do you want to leave this IRA or whatever it is to when you die? So you are able to designate beneficiaries for all of your different types of retirement accounts. So that could be a 401k, an IRA, Roth IRA. You fill out, it's not done through a trust. It's a form that you have to fill out with the company where the account is located. And you might be, if you're a married couple, a lot of times you're going to designate your spouse as the beneficiary of your IRA. That makes sense, but maybe you're, have lost your spouse and now you're single. So now you might want to look and make sure your beneficiaries are updated to be, let's say you have children and you want to now leave the IRA account to your children. You need to update the beneficiary form with the company to list your children as beneficiaries.
I've got a follow-up question. So, speaking of children, what kind of controls can I establish to protect those who will be inheriting from me or us if they're too young, irresponsible, or have special needs?
Yeah, so the answer is you are able within your trust document, let's just assume you set up a trust now as your primary estate planning document. You can include provisions in there that says that on my death, rather than this beneficiary receiving the money outright, it's going to go into a trust for this beneficiary, okay? And what that means is you're going to have somebody other than the beneficiary who's going to be holding and managing the money for them. So that's the basic trust arrangement. And then the trust, this all happens after you're gone. The trust is going to have instructions in there for that trustee as to what you want the trust to pay for this beneficiary, right? So it might be an adult child that has special needs, right? They need the help. You're going to need to set up a trust for that child. And the sky is the limit in terms of, what you can have the trust pay for or not pay for, right? That's a discussion you have with your attorney. You might not want the trust to pay for certain things, or you might want the trustee to be able to pay for certain things. You can do all of that as part of the planning now, which is great. So that's the answer, is a trust.
So along those lines, whether it's something like that with a special needs child, or if I'm unable to handle my own affairs due to health, who's the best person to put in charge? I mean, is it a family member? Is it a fiduciary? Is it who's going to help me?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends.
It
I know
depends.
everybody hates that answer, but most so definitely part of the estate planning is gonna be what happens if I become incapacitated. So it's not only what happens when I die, it's what happens if I lose capacity, right? People lose capacity. By capacity, I mean the ability to make decisions and manage your own affairs. And it could be because of dementia, or it could be a stroke, there's different causes. So you have to have you should have a plan for, if that happens to me, who is going to be A, managing my financial affairs for me and making financial decisions for me, and B, who's going to make healthcare decisions for me, okay? And they don't have to be the same person, right? Most people, obviously, they want to name prefer to name a family member as to fill these roles as agent under these documents, and in a lot of cases that's fine. It could be an adult child that you're naming to take over managing things for you, but choosing the right person is incredibly important, and that's also where the estate planning attorney can give you some value, is counseling you on who to name to fill these roles. There are professional fiduciaries out there, and I do recommend that to a fair amount of clients. And I recommend, okay, so talk to, you can check out these fiduciaries, I can vouch for them, but there are a lot of cases where people just don't have a family member that they can name, as agent under the power of attorney or healthcare agent, whatever the role is. And, I am, the longer I've been doing this work, the bigger I am an advocate for professional fiduciaries. Naming a professional does several things. A, everything's gonna get done correctly. B, you're not burdening a family member with these jobs. It can be a lot of work, so think about that. If you're gonna name a family member, that you might not wanna burden that family member with this. And then the third reason a fiduciary is good in some situations is they're neutral, right? The neutrality. You're not naming a child, right? Where then now you have the potential where your children are going to start arguing or be suspicious of each other, right? You don't want that, right? That's the last thing you want, is your children to start arguing over, your affairs.
We did do, how many were at the seminar where we had the 3 fiduciaries? Yeah, was that helpful? Awesome. Okay, so that'll be one of the videos that Robert so kindly videoed for us that will be on the website. We're a little behind that, but thank you. Okay, due to time, I want to make sure we get to everybody, but 2 more quick questions. What is a digital estate? I don't even know.
Yeah, no, that's a quick answer. So, I mean, there's 2 categories of digital assets. There's things like cryptocurrency, so Bitcoin, things like that actually have a monetary value. And then there's also on the other side is your online usernames and passwords. I mean, those I think technically fall under digital assets.
Oh, okay.
And so just practically speaking, I'll put this out there that obviously you want to keep a record of all your usernames and passwords for your online accounts, because that is going to cause a problem if something sudden happens to you.
Right.
But yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay. Thought it was more technical than that. And then your last question is going to be, will the surviving spouse be responsible with the other's medical bills?
Yeah, I mean, so the law is that, most expenses like medical expenses, copays and things it's a community debt. So community, if there's community property, then it's responsible for paying those debts. That is the general rule. So in theory, one spouse dies, they had a debt, the community estate is legally responsible for paying that debt. Now, with that said, let's just real quick, and then I'll pass. There's Medicare. There's 2 programs. There's Medicare and there's Medicaid, and they're very different programs. Now, Medicare does not have the right to come after somebody's estate to try to get reimbursed for the money they paid for the individual. So that's Medicare. They don't go after people's estates. Medicaid, on the other hand, which in California is known as Medi-Cal, they do in some cases go after somebody's estate to recoup the money they paid for that deceased individual. Okay, Generally speaking, though, and we get this question a lot, is, somebody dies, the next of kin or whoever, and they ask, am I responsible for my brother's debt or my mother's debt? The answer is generally is no, with that one exception I just mentioned about community property. But generally speaking, somebody dies, if they have debts, it's a debt of their estate, but their next of kin is not legally responsible for that debt, generally speaking. Unless perhaps that relative, signs some sort of a guaranteeing payment of the debt, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Good information. Mary. Okay. What do you say to clients? How do you guide these clients that come to you when they've just found out that their spouse or partner is terminally ill or diagnosed with a progressive dementia, Alzheimer's, or suddenly dies? What types of things should they be thinking about beyond, disbelief, shock, and grief?
I think the first thing that I do is just sit with them, because there isn't anything that needs to be done absolutely immediately. It's a very emotional time, and sometimes people just need somebody to sit with them. And sometimes I'm that person. I mean, a lot of times I realize that even though I'm not a therapist, I'm looked to as kind of somebody who will just listen. So I do make a point to listen. I have very broad shoulders, if you can't tell. So, but how do I guide these clients? I talk to them a little bit about, what is top of mind for them, because I want to make sure I'm answering their questions. I talk to them a little bit about what things eventually need to be done, who they should be speaking to, including me. But I want to make sure my clients know that I'm not there to force them, rush them, do anything that they're not ready to do. Yes, stuff has to eventually happen. Accounts need to be re-registered, but all of that can wait. And frankly, most of it can't be done until you have a death certificate, and that's going to take a few weeks to get. So it's just a matter of helping them process, helping them understand. I actually have a checklist that I give my clients, what things you need to think about when a spouse passes away, and I will give that to them. And then I will touch base with them over time, but my focus is not about, oh my God, we got to get this money moved around or else, that stuff's not important at the time. It's being with that grieving person in the moment and letting them know that I'm there just to listen.
Oh, that's awesome, and that's very important too. And along those same lines, Social Security and pensions. What happens when someone passes away?
Yeah. So that is of a concern, especially for people that are living on a fixed income. When they're married and they're of Social Security age, they're getting 2 Social Security checks. They're getting his and hers, right? When a spouse passes away, that spouse's Social Security check goes away, but the surviving spouse is entitled to the higher of the two. So if wife is getting a $2,000 check and husband's getting a $1,000 check and the husband dies, she can choose, of course she's going to choose to keep her own, right? But if it's flip-flopped, she'll choose to take his because his is going to be the higher one. But she no longer will have, or he will no longer have both of those Social Security checks, so it's good to know. As for a pension, this is a conversation you need to have before somebody passes away because there's lots of different options for pension designations. There's period certain, which I really don't, it's getting into the weeds a bit, but you can say, well, I want my pension to pay for 10 years or until I die. It's fine. If you die in 9 years, the pension will pay 1 more year to your spouse because it's period certain. But if you live 15 years and it's period certain, your pension check goes away when you die. so your spouse will not be entitled to it. So if you want to make sure that your spouse does receive a pension check from your record and your employment, you need to make sure that you're taking that into account when you're designating how your pension is going to be paid to you. Is it based off your joint lives? And then you can get 100% or 50%. I mean, there's lots of different options out there depending on the employer and the plan and all these different things, but it is something that you need to think about. Because a lot of times people just say, well, I want to take whatever's going to pay me the most right now. Is that fair to your spouse? Maybe, maybe not, depending on what your spouse's situation is. So it's really important to make sure you're speaking with somebody who can explain all of those options to you and be a thought partner to help you make the right decision for whatever your circumstances are. Because I guarantee that every one of you in this room have different circumstances.
Yeah, for sure. How do you handle family infighting that can start as soon as a parent or step-parent passes away, and these darn kids that think they know best? Do they?
Yeah, so boy, does that happen. Money brings out the worst in people, I will say that. I feel very fortunate because I was the successor trustee of my parents' estate, and my siblings basically went, Yahoo, Mary's got the ball, you do whatever you need to do, not going to ask you any questions. I was lucky. And there are children that will step in, and when that happens, and it happens in front of me, I can be a tough cookie and say, Mrs. Smith, I want to hear from you about this. And if Mrs. Smith is not comfortable talking to me in front of son Tommy, and I can see that, because I'm pretty perceptive, I will make a phone call later and I will have a conversation offline, because there are children that seem to think that they know better than their parents do. And I always want to make it perfectly clear that while that parent is alive, it is that parent's money. It is that parent's. And if they have capacity to make decisions on their own, it's none of the children's business to be putting in their 2 cents where it doesn't belong. There are plenty of times when it does belong there, and you do want to bring your children in as part of the conversation. I truly believe that you should never blindside your children with what your estate plan says, especially if you're planning on cutting somebody out for one reason or another. Either they're a lousy child or they're a multimillionaire and they don't need your money. And your sister who has special needs could really use the money. Have that conversation before you pass away so that they understand why you're making the decisions you're making. But those kids that seem to just butt in there, I try and shut them down as much as I possibly can in a polite way. It's like, I really appreciate what you're saying here, but.
Yeah. I deal with the same thing in real estate. It's very special. Okay. How should couples think about life insurance? What discussions should take place before someone passes away?
Yeah, well, if somebody is about ready to die, life insurance is kind of off the table. But if you have life insurance, life insurance is one of those things, and because I don't sell any product, I'm what's called a fee-only advisor. So my clients are paying for my advice. They're not paying for any product that I sell. So when it comes to life insurance, it's why do you need life insurance? There needs to be a reason for life insurance. Is it because you have minor children that you want to make sure get educated should you die? Is it because you have a mortgage on your house and you want to make sure that your spouse can pay that mortgage off when you die? But eventually that might change over time. Another reason to have life insurance is if you have so much money that you're going to have a taxable estate, and that is such a big number right now. If you are in that case, bravo. So, but truly there needs to be a reason for life insurance, because at some point in your life, a different type of insurance might be needed more. Maybe it's long-term care insurance. Maybe you bought life insurance when your kids were small for the education and the pay off the house thing, But now the kids are all raised, they're married, they're on their own, you have your grandkids, the house is paid off, and you still have this life insurance policy that you're paying for every single year. The original need is no longer there. If there's a new need, it's fine, keep it in place. But if there is no other need, how can we redeploy those premium dollars to buy the insurance or no insurance that you need more today than what you needed 20 years ago or 30 years ago? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. What recommendations do you give about notifying financial entities after someone passes?
Yeah. You do want to be really careful about that. So my clients, because they trust me, I usually am one of the first people to find out. And I know to keep my mouth shut because, again, I mentioned it earlier, you probably don't even know what the heck a registered investment advisor is versus a broker. A broker is actually who holds your money. A registered investment advisor, I just have access to be able to, monitor. It's like having a power of attorney on your account, so I don't touch your money, and I don't work for the brokerage houses that hold your money. So if a brokerage house finds out that somebody has died, they will lock your account down. If a bank finds out that somebody on that account has died, they will lock your account down until you prove that you are the person that's entitled to get into that account. How are you going to do that? With a death certificate. Are you going to have a death certificate the day somebody dies? No, you're not. So if you need to be able to have access to the account, you need to be very careful about when you notify the financial entities about the death of somebody. And so the perfect world is you're walking in and you're talking to the financial entity when you have a death certificate in this hand, you have your successor trustee paperwork in this hand or your executor paperwork in this hand, and you hand it all to them because then they can do everything all at once so that you have access and you never lose access to the money. Because as the successor, as the executor, or even as a surviving spouse, you're going to have bills to pay, you're going to have mortgage payments still, all that stuff, your PG&E bill, none of it stops. And you're going to have to be able to keep going with all of that while you're waiting for a death certificate to show up. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Is that true for a joint account?
No, it's not. That is perfect point. I'm glad you remembered to ask me that question. Yeah, if it's joint account, it's pretty easy.
Awesome. And, okay, I've got a couple more minutes, and then we're going to open it up to your questions. So be writing those down because you've got some really smart cookies here you can ask questions to for free. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. What thoughts do you have about a client's financial professional being local versus being long distance? Any pros and cons to that?
Yeah, I think it's personal choice, and it depends. Back to the attorney language here. I'm biased. If my clients live in Walnut Creek or Lafayette or someplace like that, I'm in Walnut Creek, it's going to be really easy to get a hold of me. But I do know people that have advisors on the East Coast. Sometimes it's a family member. But I think it depends. And how much are you going to need to depend on them to help you and be available to you? It might be, and I'm not saying matter of fact, it might be a local person, maybe a little bit easier to get a hold of if there's not a time difference and a distance. I do think, and this is actually more back to Lee's area, that healthcare people should be local because they're the ones going to be advocating for you. But financial professionals like myself, it depends. It really depends. It's personal choice.
I will go back, and I'm sure you've all experienced this, but I'm the successor trustee to my mom's trust, and I had all those lovely documents, and the bank just gave me the worst time.
Yeah, well, don't get me started about the banks.
Don't get me started about it. Anyway, just
especially
saying.
the big banks. The big banks can be a real pain in the backside.
Nasty. Okay, and then some hope. Give us some homework, action steps that you recommend to your clients before your loved one passes away. What can we be doing today to be prepared?
Yeah. So I want all of you to go home. And if you're interested, you can reach out to me and I will send you my checklist that I mentioned earlier about what you need to know. You need to know where every bank account is across town. God knows there's plenty of people that diversify by every bank in town by having a CD in every bank in town. I bet you there's a couple of you in this room right here. And then they also have brokerage accounts in multiple places, and they have 401ks from their 12 different employers. You need to make sure that's all written down because you don't want to lose track of that. Not only that, who is your attorney? Who is your tax person? Who is your banker? Who is your financial advisor? Make sure that the names and the phone numbers are there written down. And this is like a document that you can type up and put into a binder with your trust, because I'm sure your attorneys give you this beautiful binder with all the documents in, at least mine did. And put in there, what are the things? You know what else should go in there? Those passwords that Lee was referencing. What is your password to Facebook? Do you know how hard it is to shut down a Facebook account if you don't have a password to get in there? It is the weirdest thing seeing my deceased sister's Facebook page pop up periodically.
And real quick, Facebook allows you to designate what they call a
Yes.
legacy contact now. So if you go into your Facebook account, I think Apple maybe has this as well. You could actually designate a person who can be in charge of that account if you die.
Right. Yeah. But that's pretty recent. So, and a lot of
You can
people
also
don't realize-
save off all your photos so those don't disappear into the ether.
Yeah, those Google accounts and Apple and everything. You've got to have all those passwords written down. You know what else is a really important one? Where's the gas shutoff valve to the house? Where's the main water line shut off to the house? Where's the keys to the RV? Dayna had that situation. Big old RV. Tom died.
Couldn't get it moved. Nobody knew where George had put the keys.
Yeah.
It was an issue, I'm telling you.
So, where are the keys to the cabin and the cars and the everything else? I mean, it's a plethora of stuff that you should have written down, but never assume that your spouse knows that. My husband does plenty of stuff. In fact, my husband does all of our financial stuff because I deal with everybody else's financial stuff, so I don't want to deal with my own financial stuff. Cobbler has the worst shoes, right? No, but I'm very much involved. I know where everything's at. I know where the shutoff valves are. I know who his doctors are. I know who our attorney is and our tax professional and our insurance people and all of that. And we do have it written down because just in case, because my husband and I like to travel, if we go down in that plane together, I want to make sure my kids know who and where everything is at.
Right. And then what about the key to the safety deposit box?
Oh, Lord.
What about the combination to the safe? Like, this list goes on and on. So I recommend you take that beautiful binder that your attorney gives you and maybe even put it in a bigger binder. Call it your family operations manual.
Yep.
And put everything that you can think of. And then as time goes on, you'll be walking through a room or you'll be in your what's it drawer and you're like, oh, yeah, I should add this to the operations manual. So whether it's your spouse, your loved one, your kids, whoever is going to be, helping down the road, they need to know all these things that
Right.
we don't even think about because we're going through our daily lives and we're busy. Okay,
If I can add something, since we do live in California, make sure there are 2 copies of that, one in your home and one someplace else in
Yes.
case your house burns down. Personal experience.
Oh,
Yes.
Jane.
Yes.
It's the reality, right? If everything you have is in your home and your home burns down,
Right.
it's as if you've done nothing.
Right.
Depends on the fire. It depends
Our
on the
house
fire.
burned down in the Oakland Hills fire, and there was 4 inches of ashes. There was literally nothing left. Even a safe
burnt
would not have
Yeah,
helped.
yeah.
So just word to the wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, fire safes is if the intensity is high enough, a fire safe will not
melts.
survive a fire.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it is word to the wise. My family has lost property in fires as well, and
Yeah,
so
a lot
we
of
did
us
not
have.
lose a primary home, thank God.
Yeah.
But I was going to make a comment.
Well, and I'm gonna wrap things up with Jane, so we make sure we have time for Q&A here. But a few more questions I wanted to circle back to Jane about. do you discuss, because again, we're back to the kind of the emotional, spiritual side of things. Do you discuss pre-planning about funeral and memorial arrangements with people that maybe?
Yeah, I would say the biggest gift you can give your family when it comes to dealing with the emotional aftermath of your own death is to tell them in advance what you want to have done with your remains, what you would like to have done with, in terms of any memorial service or dispersal of ashes. I recently did a memorial service for a man who had written out his complete memorial service from the music he wanted played to the scriptures he wanted to have read to who he wanted to have speak. And the family was so relieved by not having to worry about whether they were doing him justice and doing it right by him. So it's a beautiful gift that you can give. And after his service, I actually had a few of our members come into my office and say, okay, we need to talk now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's peace of mind.
Yes.
I think another gift, write down your story.
Yeah.
You know, your kids, you've been trying to tell them all their entire life. And I remember doing this to my grandfather, and it's like, yeah, whatever, Grandpa, you know. So you grew up in Washington, D.C. and spent every day in the Library of Congress reading. I couldn't care less. Now,
I know.
I wish I had those stories. I wish I had written them down. My mother-in-law, for her 90th birthday, wrote her life story, had it bound with photographs, and gave it to her children and her grandchildren. And I will tell you, that is one of the most precious gifts that my children and her son, my husband, have from their mother, and it's in her voice. So,
That's so sweet.
yeah, it's a beautiful gift, and you may think that, oh, I haven't done anything special, but, you know, what did you do as a kid? Where did you go to school? Who were your friends? What did you like to do? You know, who was your first boyfriend or girlfriend, you know?
My kids must know something I don't, because they gave both my husband and I these books for Mother's Day and Father's Day telling your story. I'm like, I still have some living to do here, but I don't know. Kind of worries me a little bit. Okay, Jane, what can religious communities offer those who've lost a loved one? I mean, I think some of us know some of it, but there's some wonderful grief groups.
Yeah.
And
So if you belong to a house of worship or even have a friend who does, there are often, support groups, grief support groups that churches or synagogues may offer to members. And I know that's been really helpful to members of our church to come in and spend 6 months with a group of people, because grief, again, is not something you're over with immediately. You know, there's also just having someone available, whether it's one of our pastors or one of our deacons or our Stephen ministers, people who are equipped to just come and listen to you as you're grieving. Often we just want somebody to witness our grief, to hear our story, and there's just a lot of comfort that can be done, that can be offered by having someone who's willing to listen. In the book of Job, if you're familiar with it, his 3 friends show up and they sit in silence with him for 7 days before any of them say anything. And then they start yammering, and then they start getting in trouble and offering all kinds of poor advice. But those 7 days are just a really important thing to have. And then there's just, an opportunity to be in community. A lot of houses of worship have senior groups or other sorts of gatherings, life groups that get together. And to be able to be with people is really important when you're grieving. So just all kinds of, opportunities, as well as taking care of your own spirit.
And you and I talked briefly about Stephen's ministry.
Yes.
And how that's not just Lafayette Arundel Presbyterian.
Yeah. There's it's a non-denominational ministry called Stephen Ministry, and we have about 24 of them at Lafayette Arundel Presbyterian Church. These are people who've received 50 hours of intensive training to be able to accompany people through major life transitions. So whether it's a cancer diagnosis or grief, being an empty nester for some people is hard to get through. And a lot of churches in our area have people who are trained specifically for this purpose.
I love that. And then this is a precursor to our December seminar, which is going to be all about dating intimacy, sex, it's going to be good. But anyway, the precursor question to Jane is, when my spouse has passed and I finally become interested in maybe dating again, how can I help my children if they aren't ready for me to date again?
This is one I can share from personal experience.
Ooh, okay, do
yes.
tell.
My mother died at age 85. My dad was 87 at the time, and he could not boil a pot of water. He was desperate to have someone else in his life, and he dated for a couple years, which we were okay with just because we knew he was lonely and none of us lived in the area. But he called me up one night and said, I think I'm going to get engaged. And I took in a deep breath. And he was 89 at the time, and he said, but we need to make sure we work out the financial aspects first. And he and this woman needed to talk to their attorney and their financial advisor about what it might mean, for their respective assets at this stage of life. And my siblings and I said, can't you just live together? I mean, wouldn't that be a heck of a lot easier? Okay, this is coming from a pastor, right? Or go off to Italy and have a marriage there which won't be recognized here in the U.S. Just do something creative. Well, my dad wanted to have an honorable relationship, and it was hard for us as kids. Helen will never be my stepmother. She will never have the title mother to me in any way because my mother was my mother. Yeah. But what I will say is that my dad lived to be almost 100, and they had 10 really good years together. And so for me, in retrospect, looking at my dad having somebody to just bumble around the house with and not be lonely was a huge gift. Yeah. But not only that, as we age and our bodies become frail and we're less able to do things, having agency about our own life and to make our own decisions is hugely important. So, I actually encourage people to allow their parents, because their parents are their parents, to make their own decisions, obviously with whatever wise counsel you may want to provide. But I do think not being lonely and exercising some agency and choice of decision is huge for people who are in their later stages of life.
Oh, that's awesome. So I'll end with, we want to surround ourselves with trusted, knowledgeable people that you can rely on. So those will be part of your team. Right. So it's 11:30. Can we give these three a big round of applause? They were excellent. And I hope that you leave. I hope you leave with some new ahas, or maybe take care of some homework that you've been waiting to deal with. So go out and enjoy the day. Stay cool. And we'll see you next month. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, yeah.